Doing a series of videos with the tutors, and I'm one of them, and so I'm going to start my videos talking about Middle Ages literature. That was the very first course that I ever started teaching when my daughter was turning 12. And it's an English language class, language arts class, based on literature like Beowulf and Chaucer, and we do Ivanhoe as well because it's set in the Middle Ages. The inspiration behind it was Ambleside Online's Year 7, if any of you have ever looked at that before. And I kind of tweaked it because, having studied medieval literature in the past, I really wanted to bring a more variety to it, and particularly I wanted to bring in the York Mystery Plays so students could have a taster of what the drama was like back in, it was basically Chaucer's day. So the book list is like half is based on books that were from medieval times, or even Dark Ages, I suppose, and then half are books about the Middle Ages. And the idea is to give students a real good taster of the kinds of issues and mythology, I suppose, that we tend to think about with Middle Ages. But in the meantime, they're reading those books, but they're also learning to read for comprehension. The books aren't easy, but they start off kind of feeling very challenged, and then they are able to move from reading Beowulf and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in translation, so it's in English, and Chaucer, where basically they're just trying to get to understand the story that they're reading, and then writing their pieces in our narrations where they're telling back what they can understand about the story. And if they do this every week for the 30 weeks that we study, by the end of the year, they're actually reading Tennyson's Idylls of the King, which is even harder, I think. But they find it accessible, and they're able to understand the story and the big themes that come in it, and find the beauty in the writing as well. And so by doing their narrations week in and week out, and growing and growing and growing in their reading, they just massively improve their comprehension. And on top of that, there's always 3 discussion questions each week, one on the main book that we're reading, and then we have 2 books that we read along all through the year. One is a history book about old times in England. I don't want to say Old English because that's a different language, but it's just about old times, sort of like the history of England up until about just before Shakespeare, which is just like the books that we're reading. And that's one of them, and then the other one is about Arthurian mythology. And so there's discussion questions for each one of those. And they're quite open-ended. It's not, for example, how many knights were mentioned on page 12. It's something a bit more open, like in one particular story, a chap gets off of a crime because he's good looking. And so I asked them a question: is that okay to get off on a crime because they're good looking? And then it's kind of neat because they, a lot of them will say no. And then, but the trick is, why do you say no? Why is it not okay? And then it lets them express things about the world as they know it. And sometimes, though, the book gives them some sort of justification for these things. And so even though maybe their first sort of moral, ethical impetus is to say, absolutely, you shouldn't get off of a crime just because you are good looking, but because of the context of the story, maybe there is something in there, some reason, and then they can bring that up as well. So nothing is hard to answer, but it's challenging them to answer it in a way to justify themselves and learn to express themselves and bring the text in to their answer. And so the reading each week and the discussion questions each week and the narration each week, I anticipate that could take between 4 and 5 hours of homework. So we meet for the 1 hour webinar, and then we have the 4 and 5 hours of homework afterwards. There's also every week a fun extra credit thing to do. It might be making puppets, it might be making something in food, it might be taking a photo of something, but there's always something extra each week for everybody to get involved in and get that little extra point on the end. The kind of students I envision for this class are generally middle school age, so you're sort of 11 to 14s. The reading will be very challenging, but it was set on Ambleside Online for 12-year-olds, and that's when I started it, and people were challenged, but they rose to the occasion, really, and challenged themselves and got much stronger. Sometimes, though, people like to start with the British novel class instead, and because you can find those books more easily and as audiobooks, and they're just more typically novels. So you might want to go and compare the two by going to that video and listening to British novels. The add-on for Middle Ages Lit, though, is all the kind of transactional writing. So letters, speeches, descriptions, story, that kind of thing. And for that reason, if you're in the UK, you may want to save that for your sort of 14-year-old just before they start really pushing into their exams. So some take it their 14-year-old year, and then maybe the next year, maybe take the IGCSE in the autumn. So they sort of have Middle Ages Lit and Add-on Writing, a crammer in the summer, and then they take the exam. To me, that's the optimum. Sometimes they take Middle Ages Lit and the add-on, and then I do offer some crammers in January as well, and then they might sit it in the May. I think that's a bit more rushed, but it is still doable. And so some people do that. And if you're in America, you can just ignore everything I just said. And it's one high school credit for the year. If they take the main class and the add-on, it's an honors class as well. But I would suggest, if it's a student's first year with us and they're sort of 11, 12, 13, to hold off on the add-on writing and do that maybe a little later. So what do I mean by that? Don't take Middle Ages if you're going to go for the add-on if they're 11 or 12. That might be better, British novel without add-on, and then 13, 14, 15 doing the Middle Ages and the add-on. Particularly if it's their second class with us, the add-on is easier to cope with. I think that's all so basically what happens in my classes is they read, they do the 3 discussion questions, the narration, and the extra credit if they want to. Throughout the year, I do a couple of spot checks additionally on their writing, punctuation, vocabulary, and that sort of thing. And we have some 3 presentations in the year where they get a grade on that. And all those grades get added up, and at the end of the year, whatever the maximum was divides into what they actually achieved, and then I create a letter grade for that, and it comes on a certificate. So that is Middle Ages literature in a nutshell. Of course, if you have any more questions about it, you can email me at dreamingspiresHomeLearning@gmail.com. I'm happy to help you decide where to place your child, but this Middle Ages Lit was the very first one, so a lot of people will do that one first, or maybe British novel and then Middle Ages, and I can see, because of the unusual and less familiar books in Middle Ages, I can see maybe doing that one second. So that's it. That's my talk about Middle Ages. See ya.